Lesson 3.6, How does obesity lead to disease? The goals of this lesson are to explore the health consequences of obesity and to expose students to one theory of how obesity may cause atherosclerosis and type 2 diabetes. At the end of this lesson, students should be able to describe the mechanisms of type 2 diabetes and atherosclerosis and explain how unhealthy adipose may contribute to these diseases. We'll achieve these goals by having student complete a jigsaw and teach back about type 2 diabetes and atherosclerosis, and by having a Socratic discussion. To prepare for this lesson, you will need to review the key scientific concepts that will be presented throughout the lesson. These include the diseases associated with obesity, especially atherosclerosis and type 2 diabetes, how and why inflammation is associated with obesity, and why the apple body shape is at higher risk for cardiovascular disease. You can review the scientific content in the background reading provided for you in the teacher primer, the teacher manual, and the student workbook. The teacher primer provides in-depth knowledge about the scientific content presented in this lesson. The teacher manual or lesson plan provides a minute-by-minute explanation of this lesson, including instructions on how to manage the discussion and the activity. The student workbook provides additional explanations for the students. You will need to print out one activity worksheet per student. The key points of this lesson's do now are that obesity affects every system in the body, and how and why obesity affects these systems is not known. We'll get there by having a short discussion with the students. Ask your students what diseases are associated with obesity before showing them slide 3. Students have seen the table in slide 3 back in lesson 3.1. For the remainder of this lesson, we will focus on type 2 diabetes and atherosclerosis. The key points of this lesson's activity are to give an overview of type 2 diabetes, including, in type 2 diabetes, the insulin receptor no longer binds insulin efficiently, how metabolism of the macronutrients in the liver, muscle, and adipose is affected, and the long-term consequences if untreated, including amputation, loss of vision, and atherosclerosis. And to give an overview of atherosclerosis, including that the hardening of the arteries is caused by excess cholesterol in the blood being absorbed by white blood cells, and the consequences of a plaque rupture, which are that stroke, heart attack, or pulmonary embolism may occur. And unhealthy adipose tissue may cause type 2 diabetes and atherosclerosis by causing inflammation in the body. We'll get there by organizing a jigsaw and a student teach-back. Divide students into groups, and each group will learn and then teach about either type 2 diabetes or atherosclerosis using the activity worksheet. Caution, you will want to review the jigsaw readings to make sure they are at an appropriate level for your class. The activity worksheet asks students to take notes on those key points, which are the mechanism or cause of the disease, the signs and symptoms or complications of the disease, and prevention of the disease. You can review all of this information in the worksheet answer key. It has everything organized just as your students will be organizing it. Additionally, the teacher manual and the teacher primer go over all of the key concepts. After the students have completed their reading and taken notes on it, you will organize a teach-back in which students will teach each other about either type 2 diabetes or atherosclerosis. The other students should complete their worksheets for the disease that they weren't assigned to in the activity. The key points of this lesson's discussion are that some people can be overweight or obese without developing a comorbidity like type 2 diabetes or atherosclerosis, and that unhealthy adipose, which is adipose that can't expand to hold excess fat from a calorie-dense diet, may be the cause of some of these diseases. We'll get there by having a short discussion. Before the discussion, show your students the questions on slide 13 and ask them to form some hypotheses. The content presented on slide 14 is novel and the result of relatively recent research. This is a promising explanation as to why obesity can lead to disease. Be sure to review the scientific concepts presented here in the teacher manual and the teacher primer before this lesson. The key point of this lesson's wrap-up is that maintaining a healthy weight can prevent type 2 diabetes and atherosclerosis. We'll get there by having a short discussion. Students should be able to link a healthy diet and weight back to the etiologies or causes of these diseases. Students are often engaged in this lesson and may ask a lot of questions, so be sure to know the content before you go on to teach this lesson in your classroom. A common question is why the body's response to high cholesterol in the blood is to send immune cells, when this response leads to plaque formation. While the answer is not really known, the best guess at this point is that in the grand scheme of human evolution, we haven't been obese for very long. For most of the humans' time on Earth, we've been in periods of famine without a guaranteed meal coming, so our bodies have not properly evolved to deal with the large amounts of fat and calories. The immune response to LDL being stuck on artery walls is simply the response to an abnormal situation. Students may not understand what we mean when we talk about inflammation. The inflammation we're talking about here is just like the inflammation you experience when you stub your toe and you have an inflammatory response, meaning your toe turns red, swells, and starts throbbing. Except this is low-grade chronic inflammation, so it can go unnoticed. At the molecular level, this means that there is an increase in the proteins that tell the immune system there is a problem somewhere in the body. These are called inflammatory cytokines. At the end of this lesson, students should be able to describe the mechanisms of type 2 diabetes and atherosclerosis and explain how unhealthy adipose may contribute to these diseases. Students should already have learned about the mechanisms of insulin in lessons 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, and 2.6. In this lesson, we will see in more detail how insulin is related to diabetes. In the next lesson, students will apply their knowledge of insulin and glucose in a lab. Heart disease and its relationship to our diet is discussed again in lesson 4.3. Don't forget that if you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, to let us know. You can contact any of the CTSE team members and we will be happy to help.